went to see my parents, and you were going to, state your case for getting married to me.
Right.
And
You were pregnant in Inwood House in New York, and I was coming to visit you. And I had this idea that I could talk anybody into anything. So all I had to do was show up at your parents' house, present a rational argument why we should be together, keep the baby, get married, and go off into marital bliss.
Yeah.
And they'd just agree. And part of my strategy was to show them I was a normal, okay guy. Now, at the time, I was had been doing a lot of drugs. I was kind of homeless and penniless and had no direction.
Yeah, and you had hepatitis too.
And so I figured, well, that's no big deal. We'll just soldier on, right? So I went to Alexander's and bought myself a clean pair of pants. I went to and got a haircut and called up your father and said, I'm coming over. We need to discuss the future. And you were really optimistic about it too. You wanted me to call you right after the episode and see how it went. So I go over and knock on the door. We go in, and man, a cold reception.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk, and they really didn't like the idea at all. They didn't like the idea I was even involved in your life in any way. I'm the father.
Right.
Your father says to me, young man, I don't want you messing with my daughter. And my daughter was, I think you were 15 when you got pregnant.
Yes.
Which means you weren't 16, which means you were underage, which means he could press charges of statutory rape against me.
And he would have too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was the conclusion of our meeting.
Yeah.
His threat to me to just leave you alone, let this thing play out, and I should go away. And I called you up, I remember, and because you were waiting, and I gave you the lowdown, and that was not good. That was just awful, because I really thought, I'm doing the right thing. I want to do the right thing. I can change my life around, and we be.
Well, if there was any hope at all that I was feeling, that was the end of it.
That was the end of
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Another thing I really loved about Inwood House, though, was that there was a payphone, and for once you could call me.
I could actually call you.
You could call me, and I
get your girlfriend to call you or whatever.
Right. I couldn't call you because you didn't have a house. So I never knew where the heck you were going to be. But you could call me, and then the girls would, call Jill. It's for you, and then the day came when it was really strange. I was I had a due date, which I expected. Well, they tell you it's a due date. That's when you're going to have your baby. And it was about a week before my due date. And I woke up in my little bed, and I had terrible cramps, just terrible cramps. And but I didn't think anything of it. And then I didn't go down to breakfast. And one of my girlfriends poked her head in. And I said, I'm not feeling good. I'm not going to breakfast. And then lunch came. And by now, oh my gosh, my stomach is killing me. And I'm crying. And I'm all bent over and everything. And another girl came in. No, it wasn't. It was Mrs. Binns, the one who was in charge, who was wonderful. She was English, and she was like, anyway, she was just wonderful. And she came in to check on me because I missed breakfast and lunch. And, she saw my condition, and she's going, oh, my God, you're giving birth. So they called the nurse. We had a 24-hour nurse, and the nurse, her face turned white and said, we have to get you to the hospital. They didn't even have time to call an ambulance.
So you took a cab?
They took a cab, and it was one of those, like you see in the movies, the cab driver, you gotta hurry, you gotta get her to the hospital. I'm giving birth in the back seat. And he did not want to take me. But anyway, I just got there at the hospital, and all I remember was going into the room and giving birth. It was like that, and I mean, thinking back to it now, I was so lucky. Some of the girls would be in labor for hours and days and this and that. I think it couldn't have been more than about 7-8 hours. So, it was an easy delivery. you know, but that was the only thing that was easy. I mean, the pregnancy, the heartache and everything, that was not easy. But, and then I was in the hospital for 3 days. They let me be in the hospital. Oh, but this, oh my God, it broke my heart. I got permission for you to be able to be in the delivery room, you know, during the delivery, and I had Andy call you, but you were too sick. You were too sick to come, so you didn't make that. And all I kept saying, I kept calling for you, and
Yeah, I was in Florida. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right, because you were sick. You were staying at your mom's, yeah, and anyway, so you weren't there. I know you wanted to be, but you weren't. And then I was, like I said, I was in the hospital, and 3 days I was there, and it's so cruel that they brought my baby to us, and we named her, and you know, we named her Amanda, but we always called her Mandy. So they would bring Mandy to me about 3 times a day, and I bottle fed her, and I would just hold her, and you know, and
Why did you name her Amanda?
I just liked it.
That's all?
That's it. I just liked the name Amanda.
Because I always thought I came up with the name.
No, you
Because of the Rolling
didn't.
Stones song.
No,
Miss
you.
Amanda Jones.
Yeah, well, you didn't, because you know why? I never even heard the song. I never even heard that song until years later.
I thought
So,
Mick named our daughter.
Yeah, no. I just like the name.
Okay.
Just like you to take credit for something. But anyway, well, I'm glad you made me laugh, because I was starting to feel really sad. So they brought her to me those 3 days, 3 times a day, and I knew I was going to have to give her up, because my parents would not let the baby come home with me, and I knew that she had to be given away to be adopted. So
Now, I want to understand that, because you're the parent, and she's your daughter.
Right.
And so you have legal responsibility for her, and yet your parents would not allow their granddaughter to enter their own home.
I had no legal rights. I was underage. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't legally take her as mine unless I was 18. I had to be 18. I don't know, maybe things are different now, but back in 1969.
So she was like a ward of the state or something?
Yes, exactly. And that's what happened.
No,
The day
no.
I went
Now,
to...
your parents, this was their first grandchild.
Yeah, the first grandchild.
And they
yeah.
wanted to deny this child even existed?
And this is something I've never been able to really wrap my head around. They came to see me in the hospital. They came, Mom and Dad and Aunt Joan and Uncle Jack. And they came to see me, and they saw the baby. My Aunt Joan was thrilled. She was holding Mandy and everything. My mother didn't want to hold her, anything, and she just was miserable. She just was miserable, and I was so thrilled to have them see how cute she was, and just But anyway, so when I left the hospital. I had to go back to Inwood House, and someone came and took her, a social service person, and they just took her away, and they brought her up back to Middletown, Goshen, because that was where social services was, and I didn't know who was going to take care of her. I didn't know where she went. That was it. They just took her away, and so I got to stay at Inwood House for a couple days, and then my parents picked me up because they had to pay for this, which they never let me forget. And it was very expensive because it was a very, very high-class, wonderful place to be. So then I went home, and I was allowed to visit her.
At the social
At the
services
social
place?
yeah.
Like a couple times a week?
I could go once a week.
Once a week you got to see your baby?
Once a week. I would go after school. I'd drive to Goshen, and I get to see... Anita went with me all the time. And whoever it was, social service person, would bring her in. We had a little visitation room. I mean, I just held her. That was it. I held her and cried. And this went on for a couple weeks.
How'd you feel when you left the social services after you were there for like an hour or two? Or
That was it. It was about an hour and a half.
Then you'd have to leave?
I'd have to leave, and they'd take her away. And I would go home, and I would just cry, and I was so depressed. And then I went back to school, and I was so depressed. Oh, I don't know if I ever told you this. I forgot about it, but I must have been in school maybe a week or two, and it was less than 2 months after Mandy was born. And they give you pills, to stop you from making milk.
Yeah.
And I remember being at my locker before school, and Anita came up to me, and she's going, "Jill, you got to go in the girls' room." And here I go, and I had these 2 huge wet spots on my blouse because I was still making milk. And God bless her. I tell you, I don't know what I would have done without Anita. She went and got me a sweater, and I put that on, and I covered myself up. But I mean, all of this was just awful, and I was so depressed. And I don't know where you were, maybe still in Florida, I don't know, but you weren't around. You were not around. And I couldn't call you because you weren't in town anywhere. And it broke my heart. Well, it was about 4 weeks I went to visit with Mandy. And I said, I'm only 16. It was going to be a year and a half before I turned 18. And so I knew I had to do the right thing. I couldn't stand the idea of her being in a
warehouse.
Yeah.
For a year and a half.
Exactly. I didn't know if she was being put back and forth anywhere. And Anita was with me, and I said, Anita, I'm going to sign the papers. And I signed the papers, and I said goodbye to her for the last time. And Anita took pictures of the 2 of us. And then I drove home, and that was it. And I never saw her again. And I went home, and I told my mother, I said, I signed the papers. And she said, well, it's about time. And nobody spoke of her ever again. And that was it. And she was gone.
I had those pictures.
Yeah, that was all I had of her, was the pictures.
I never met her. I carried those pictures around for 35 years.
I know.
That's all I had. A picture.